Hey everybody, Matt Geary here for the Geek Pridecast on this Sunday evening. Tonight we have a guest, but my co-host is Jon Jo Cosgrove.
Hey everyone, kind of here.
And my guest tonight is Santi from the Straightshoot podcast. Welcome, sir.
Hello, and everybody that's watching. Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm Santi from Straightshoot. We're maybe going to talk a little bit of professional wrestling, which sort of falls in the world of geekdom. I think it has its place in there. I think there's definitely a debate that can be had if it falls, within the world of geek culture or not.
100%, man. Geek culture is a very broad brush. It's very much down to if you're into something a lot, and you guys are very much into your wrestling. So before we kind of start dive into it, tell us about yourself. Tell us about Straightshoot. What's the whole thing?
For sure. So Straightshoot is a fan-run wrestling podcast, and that's a big differentiator because most wrestling podcasts that are out there are either run by former professional wrestlers or run by industry insiders. There's very little in the way of actual fan-conducted professional, I guess, if we want to give us that label, podcasts. So we're YouTube, every audio platform you can think of, but I guess our creme de la creme is actually on TikTok, which of all places was not the social media I was expecting for anything wrestling related to, one, be popular, and two, to I guess have as much of a reach as it's had over the last 6 months.
Yeah, so you've got what, 350,000?
Yeah, give or take 350, 360, something like that.
Like that's a lot of followers, man. Like my dog has 150,000, I think, for silly stuff, like really pointless things. It just came out of nowhere, and then suddenly you come down. But 350,000. Like, how long have you been on TikTok for?
6 months, actually, almost exactly 6 months. We started at the beginning of January. It was just my partner and I, Steve, we decided we were running the podcast for about 2 months before we started the TikTok, and we were looking for creative ways to try and garner an audience into the wrestling podcast because we were getting around 19 to 50 listens across every channel. So we decided to start a TikTok where we would do kind of like a wrestling game show trivia type of thing that him and I used to always do when we worked together in an office before the pandemic. We used to do that exact same format just across offices at the gym that we used to work at. We decided to put it on the TikTok, and literally, guys, our first TikTok went viral. It's been right from the get-go. It wasn't like a slow build. The very first TikTok that we put out, which was a Guess the Wrestler on a wrestler named Eddie Guerrero, overnight was 200,000 views, and we're like, "What the hell is going on?"
You lucky bastard.
Yeah, dude, we didn't work for it.
For that sort of thing, man. You just can't get it.
Yeah, it literally just happened off the first get-go. So I'm one of those, I guess, lucky bastards that doesn't know the grind of TikTok and like having to grow it, because it literally happened off the get-go. And I acknowledge how lucky that is because I've done YouTube since like 2012, and I know the grind that it takes to grow social medias. So I'll take it in stride. I know we're lucky.
Man, it's mad how things just take off though, because like you said, you can put on, like, you can spend, like, when I started TikTok, because at the time it was during lockdown, I was bored, and I did like stupid sort of lip sync things and stuff, because those are popular. People think those are hilarious. I'd spend so much time doing these little sort of Anchorman things and stuff like that, thinking they're absolutely hilarious, getting nothing. And then one day, on a whim, I showed my dog sleeping, and 250,000 sort of likes and stuff.
That's
and
it.
I was like, what the hell, man? What's going on? It's just out of nowhere. It just suddenly goes. What's your most popular video?
So our most popular videos are usually Guess the Wrestlers, where there's a big twist. So our most popular video, I believe, has 5 million views, and it's a Guess the Wrestler, but the wrestler is Mike Tyson. where obviously, if anybody knows professional sports, Mike Tyson is not a professional wrestler. He's a boxer, but he has a history in professional wrestling. He's in the WWE Hall of Fame and was a big part of popularizing WWE in the late 90s in its war against WCW. So we put it out as a guest the wrestler, and it went crazy. And part of the reason is because people are in the comments that don't know the true history of Mike Tyson are calling us idiots, saying, he's a boxer. He's never been in professional wrestling. He's a boxer. You guys are dumb. You don't know what you're talking about. But really, we actually know a bit more, to the point where we are being made to look dumb. But really, I mean, hey, anything at the end of the day is views and engagement.
Oh man, like you have some you had like Abraham Lincoln on there and stuff.
Can I quickly explain the story of Abraham Lincoln in professional wrestling? So I'm not an American, so I don't know American history, but just doing research as like, how can I mess with Steve in this Guess the Wrestler trivia stuff? And I found out that former American president Abraham Lincoln has a amateur wrestling record of 399 wins and 1 loss, is a county wrestling champion in the United States. He invented the wrestling move, the choke slam, which is used to this day and is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Wow, these are the
Wow.
The thing is, like, I would call bullshit in that, but it's so crazy. It's got to be true. Like, you know, that's mad. That's not being said. I love that though, and that's the one thing I like.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's the one thing I really like about your TikTok channel and your the thing is, the TikTok channel got me onto the podcast afterwards, so I started listening to the podcast afterwards. But the TikToks are just so Moorish. Like, I've been in, I was into wrestling a lot when I was young, all the way up to sort of kind of late 90s and stuff. Bret the Hitman Hart was my favorite wrestler, to the point I'm not sure if I can find I've got signed glasses from Bret the Hitman Hart, so his sunglasses, and my friend got me a cameo from him for my 40th birthday.
Wow.
Basically saying, you know, I'll send it to you afterwards, but it's like him basically saying, you know, there was a time when I went to when was it? Well, they came to Belfast, and it was the day that John Candy died. I can remember, and basically Bret Hitman Hart was there, favorite wrestler, and you know, he gives his sunglasses to somebody when he comes down the ring.
Every time.
I was just like running to the front. I was like, as a kid, I was like, he's gonna give them to me. He's gonna give them to me. It's definitely gonna be me this time. But he gave them to some kid beside me. He was in a wheelchair and stuff, and I was like, well, I was like, oh,
darn.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I guess he deserves them more than I do. So I was very upset. And all these years passed, and then on my 40th birthday, my mate sort of kind of gave me this thing. He started giving me this long spiel about, you know, because he does Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff, and he was talking about wrestling, and, you know, he was tying it in the sort of things from my past, and I wasn't really clicking. And he went, oh, I've got a video of one of my mates, and he sort of sent me this video, and I went, that's Bret the Hitman Hart. And then he basically says, you know, there was that time when I was in Belfast, and, you know, you've always supported me, and you know, and now I'm going to support you and stuff. And he sort of kind of gets these glasses out that he signed and stuff, and I was like, holy fuck. And he's just like, you know, I didn't get to give them to you that time in Belfast, but here they are now and stuff. And I literally cried, man. I've never had a more sort of heartfelt like,
that's fantastic
present in my life, man. The floodgates opened and I cried like a baby, and I was just like, my favorite wrestler giving me the one thing in my entire life that I've always wanted is sunglasses, and I got them signed, and they're like, it makes me feel emotional now thinking about it.
And what's kind of crazy about that, if we can tie it into the world of geek culture and why I do believe that professional wrestling falls in that, aside from the fact that it's got character storylines, it's got canon, it's got non-canon, right? I tie that to like a kid that's getting into Star Trek, right? He's got his own Captain Kirk. Somebody getting into Star Trek in the 2000s, they have their version of Captain Kirk. In the 90s, and it goes back to different iterations of them. Your wrestling Captain Kirk is Bret the Hitman Hart, but I know that 20 years from now, somebody is going to be in your position, bawling their eyes out over John Cena.
Yeah, man.
Over, and that's their Captain Kirk of professional wrestling. They're going to be bawling their eyes out over Roman Reigns 40 years from now, right? So I think that that's fantastic. I think that's so cool.
And it is like, actually, I can remember like massive, like out of all the wrestling, because he was literally, I don't know what it was. Like, I remember, when it was, it must have been like SummerSlam. Oh no, it wasn't. It was Survivor Series. And he was fighting $1 Million Man, and he got cheated out of the win. And there's this moment where he's just sitting there absolutely distraught because he's lost and stuff, you know, and $1 Million Man sort of kind of prancing around and stuff. I was like, oh no. And I always quite liked this sort of kind of like, you know, the underdog sort of, you know, fighting on sort of thing. And I just, you know, I loved him. And I've got so many fond memories, and that sort of thing just was like my entire childhood just finally catching up with me, and, you know, just having that one thing. And you're right, I think it's just like having your own Captain Kirk, having your own sort of Star Wars or whatever. You've got your own wrestler, and it is generational, and that is a very beautiful thing.
Yeah, you know what? I'm 30, and for me, my Bret Hart is John Cena, right? Like when I was 12 years old, like that was the guy. Like I can be 50 years old and I will always have fond memories of my wrestling Captain Kirk, John Cena. And I think that's the beautiful thing about a generational scripted sport like professional wrestling is one, you know, the people that you idolize, watch, and root for will never depreciate in value because they're getting older. Yeah. Right? That's a real sport. That's the case, right? You watch football, baseball, American football, whatever it may be. The older they get, the less relevant that they become. And there's no emotion. There generally isn't an emotional attachment to a professional athlete in their later years when they're 60, 70 years old. But there is in professional wrestling, like there is an emotional attachment to the guy that or woman that you were emotionally invested in as a kid, and you are just emotionally invested in that guy or woman for the rest of your life into adulthood. Yeah. And that's me and John Cena. And for a lot of people, that's The Rock. A lot of people, that's Stone Cold. For you, it's Bret the Hitman Hart. And with wrestling, that'll never stop, right? Because it just keeps going and going and going.
The there's a lot. John Cena seems to do a lot of good stuff where he goes sort of visits kids, you know, underprivileged kids and stuff. I saw one recently where he some Ukrainian kids who had sort of come over from, you know, I can't even remember where exactly it was, but he'd obviously been oh god, what's the word? Evacuated from the Ukraine because of the war.
Yeah, and they were in Mariupol, like in the middle of it, the worst part of the war zone.
Yeah, and he went to visit them and stayed with them, ate cake, sort of like, you know, and stuff like that, man. You know, is really, you know, And it's not just one off, because you'd think, you know, oh, maybe it's just a publicity something. But I've seen so many videos where he's done similar things, and it's just like that must be just who he is as a guy and stuff.
100%. And look, like one time I'll buy that it's a publicity stunt. Over 600 times, not a chance. That's something like the guy that he just enjoys doing. Just for context, for people that are listening that may not know the full story, this family, the boy has Down syndrome and he cannot talk. He's a non-communicative fellow with Down syndrome. And his parents told him that because he couldn't understand why they were being forced to flee. His parents told him that they are going on an adventure to meet John Cena, which is just to keep him motivated. Yep. And they eventually got refuge in Amsterdam, and John Cena got a hold of the story, and he was filming a movie in Europe, and he's just like, lunchtime, it takes an hour to get there. He just went to meet the guy. Like that's just not publicity at that point, especially like when you're that big and that famous, like you don't need it. That is clearly just something that he enjoys and gets personal fulfillment from.
I think that's you know, people who do that again because they can, and it's not the publicity. It's just because they're that sort of person, and you can generally tell. It's like over the years and stuff, I've met sort of kind of famous people and stuff from conventions and things like that, and some of them have just been assholes stuff, but you can tell the people who are genuinely sort of kind of good people by what they do outside of their day job and stuff. So doing things like that it's just quite wonderful, and you can tell he gets quite emotional as well. I've seen some other videos and stuff where he's talking to people, and these kids, they see them and their faces light up, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. So I feel sort of, as much as I've not watched wrestling in a long time, I've not sort of kept as much of a torch for it as yourself and Steve and stuff. I still sort of kind of go back and forth, and I watch the stories about these new wrestlers and what they're doing, and I watch the sort of documentaries and things like that, and it is a beautiful.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, stopping watching wrestling, I think, is something that every wrestling fan at some point goes through. I went through the phase of not watching wrestling because I'm too old for this. I don't want to watch this anymore. And then you get old enough where you're like, I don't care how old I am. This is awesome. Why did I care in grade 8 whether people knew that I was watching professional wrestling? I'm an idiot. This is like, who cares how old I am? And I think I've become about like that in just about every facet of things that I love. I guess to give you context into the things that I'm into, I'm a Twitch streamer and have been since 2004. I was one of the first 100 partners on Twitch. So like I've been streaming for a really, really long time. Nice. I have a Twitch channel that's got 70,000 followers. I stopped streaming on that because I forgot the password. So I started a new one entirely to see if I can regrow it and see if I can make lightning strike twice on Twitch. I digress. But
what sort of
these
games
are things.
What sort of games do you stream?
So I actually just went through a 9-month self-torture situation where I played nothing but From Software games. So Dark Souls, Bloodborne. I played all of them. And I've beaten all of them, and I'm so proud of it. But all of them, I have gray hairs that I didn't have before. I will say that. Wow. I will say that.
I will have to ask. I was just going to say, if you've played all the Souls Balls games, have you then completed Elden Ring as well?
So that's the one I'm saving. I'm saving this for July, August. I'm going to give myself some time to play it, but I cannot go from playing Sekiro, which is arguably the hardest one, into playing another From Software game. I'm like, no, I'm gonna play some freaking Mario or something. Like I need a mental break from these games because that's what I'm playing. That's what I was playing. That's precisely what I was playing. But yeah, so like streaming is not something I'm ashamed of telling people anymore. I am. And I will brag about it to this day. I'm a top 1% knowledge on the world of Game of Thrones, books and TV series. I arguably believe that there's very few people that know more than I do.
Please do not challenge Matt. I'm just
let's talk. I love to talk Game of Thrones with people. Not a challenge. If we can talk Game of Thrones, I will talk Game of Thrones.
I've read all the books. And it's filmed basically in my backyard in Northern Ireland. My sister's in the second series. A lot of my friends have been extras in it and stuff. One of my mates was the second AD. For a lot of it. So like pretty much everybody, if you're from Northern Ireland, you know people who've been in it and stuff like that. I read all the books before the series came out because my sister was like, so they're filming something in Red Hall, which is where my mum lives and stuff. It's like, they're filming this thing called Game of Thrones. I was like, I've heard of that. And I went out, I checked out the books. I heard it had Sean Bean in it. And I was just like, oh yeah, Sean Bean's my man. I gotta watch this shit.
He's gonna die.
Yeah, he's gonna die. That guy's gonna die. Yeah, it's like my dog's called Boromir, so it's just like Sean Bean's my man. But I started watching. I read the books I read all 5 books in a month. And I think I read the last sort of kind of 3 on holiday. And it is the most devastatingly brilliant series of books
Oh, I
Lord of the Rings.
couldn't agree more.
Obviously, I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, but
Yeah.
We can talk about Game of Thrones afterwards. Then
we definitely have to. We have to.
When we've done the wrestling, we'll move on to Game of Thrones. I'm not sure if I'll know as much as you will, but we can kind of go into that. With the, I was going to say something. Yeah, sorry. We were talking about your TikToks, and I went off on a bloody tangent about my life and crying and stuff like that. But they're so Moorish. What you do, even for people like me who haven't seen wrestling in a long time, it's something that you just sit there and you can't help but watch every time one of your videos up. And like, I have not skipped one of your videos. Like, they're so Moorish, and the thing is, they make you want to sort of kind of learn a bit more about it and stuff. And I like, one of my mates in one of the groups are in, he's into his sort of kind of an independent wrestling and stuff like that. So he's really into this, like going to these sort of backyard type things and stuff. And he's always going on about documentaries and stuff. So I've started watching. What's the one behind
Dark Side of the Ring?
Yeah, man, Dark Side of the Ring, and all the stuff. Some of the really crazy shit that's happened to some of the old wrestlers and stuff like that. And I find that super interesting.
Yeah, there's a big debate in the wrestling community as to like whether or not Dark Side of the Ring is good or bad for wrestling fans, right? In the sense that like it doesn't add any value to what you're seeing on screen every week. It's added context to what's going on behind the scenes. But here's the problem. The problem with wrestling is that, well, it's not the problem with wrestling. The problem with Dark Side of the Ring is that it's telling you the story of the man, but what people watch and what people fall in love with is the character.
Yeah.
So it's this dichotomy of like, okay, I would like to know more about what's going on in the world of professional wrestling, but I'm learning that this person that plays this character that is so fun and great to watch on television is a giant piece of trash in his real life. Right? So it's this like, do we need this? Do we need to know more about this? And then, there were some stories coming out about like some wrestlers doing things like sexual harassment and stuff. Like that's important to know. Like people should know about that stuff. Yeah. But then there's the other side of like wrestlers being addicted to drugs. Why is that any of our business? Right? Mm-hmm. So that's the like, is it good for the audience to know about all this stuff?
But it's one of those. Sorry, Jon Jo, far away.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, talking about all these things, all these stories outside of the wrestling. I've not watched wrestling properly since about 2004, 2005. But in the last couple of years, I've watched a lot of documentaries. So Owen Hart's one was quite quite upsetting, really, to get through. Chris Benoit's story was also another one that came up. China as well. Okay, they're not supposed to be heartwarming stories, but when you read some of these, I know these are very isolated incidents compared to the majority of people you see in WWE, ACW, all this side of wrestling. But watching these stories, I don't know, it almost brings it back that you do remember that these people are just human like you.
Yes.
They are just still people.
Sorry, Jon Jo, I'm interrupting you.
No, go on. No, I was just going to say that is it. Yeah.
What's funny you said that. So there was an ill-fated convention here a few years back called Blackpool Comic-Con, and the guy who did it got a load of pro wrestlers in. So you had Diesel and Mick Foley. You had what's his name? Booker T. You had a load of sort of other ones. And the most heartbreaking and one of the most lovely guys, Mick Foley, but he was an awesome guy. Like the convention got absolutely, it fell apart. A load of people lost a lot of money. He didn't pay the wrestler. He didn't pay some of the guests and things like that. But apparently Mick Foley went to a local family in Blackpool and stuff, and stayed with them, and it was just so real. It was so cool. But when I met him, he could barely walk, man. Like he was literally getting we had to help. I helped out, sort of move them from one area to another. So there's me with these huge guys, and then Mick Foley, who's like his knees were gone, and he was just not who you see or have seen on the TV, and it was quite sad because it's the reality of the thing. There's like what's on TV and what the reality is. Lovely guy though, absolutely lovely guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the wrestling documentaries, some of them, there is a sort of quite a dark edge to them, and it sort of comes into that whole. So yeah, it's like music. So you've got like, should you listen to a band if you know that the singers are racist, or he's a pedophile, or he's thinking, does that affect the music? And it's a similar thing. If they're dickheads and they're bad people, should be supported in their art form? And it's like, what comes first, art or reality? And there's always that debate. Now, I'm very much the sort of view that if somebody's a dickhead in real life, I find it hard to sort of kind of like their things. So for example, I'm a massive metal fan. I love metal and stuff, and I used to be hugely into Pantera and stuff, and then obviously Phil Anselmo started doing white pride salutes and stuff like that as gigs and things, and I was like, fuck that guy, man. I'm not sort of
now. What I was going to say is that unfortunately professional wrestling has the best example of what you're talking about. In fact, I would say that professional wrestling is split into two timelines. There's the time before the Chris Benoit murder suicides and the time after the Chris Benoit murder suicide. So the Chris Benoit situation, which we probably shouldn't get too deep into because I'm not an expert in it, is Chris Benoit, by all accounts, in terms of his in-ring skill, his accomplishments, everything that he did in the business, he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But what he did that one day, which was not just end his own life, but was to end the life of two people that had nothing to do with his pains, right? A beautiful child, his wife. There's your best example of like, where do you fall? Like, do you fall in the camp of, well, like what he did on screen and everything that he did as a professional wrestler, we need to celebrate? Or do you fall in the camp, which is where like 99.9% of wrestling fans fall, of we cannot even acknowledge this man's existence. What he did is so atrocious that we can't even begin to think of him as a wrestler anymore.
It's hard.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. Because Chris Benoit, that was back when I used to really love WWF. He was like the main guy. This was the in some ways he was almost at one point the underdog, because he just sort of like exploded onto the scene. He became
That's his character.
Champion. Yeah, and he just took over, and then just I can't remember what show it was. I think it might have been SmackDown he was on, and this was, I think, his second to last show on WWF, and he had this fantastic fight, and everyone was bigging him up, and they were putting together. I think it might. I can't remember if it was SummerSlam or there was one of the big pay-per-view ones that were coming up, and they were advertising him. They're saying, "Oh, you don't want to miss this big fight." And then I think the next week, I remember it, like the show pretty much got cancelled, and it was basically a clip show. There was it was just like highlights from earlier in the year, and then at the end of that episode they said that things have been in the news. We've many of you probably are aware of the situation with Chris Benoit, and we just want to know, we just want you to know that we do we are supporting people that are affected by this. We are working with his family, we're all this stuff, and when you see that, obviously it's how do you address that? How do you address the idea that you're like one of your top billed people, like someone who is more or less carrying your show, has gone off and done this? And as you say, 99% of people have gone, okay, I'm now going to write this guy off completely out of my mind. And it's a way of saying, I look at it as you don't forget what you had from this guy, because he was a fantastic wrestler. He was a great performer. He had such massive charisma on the screen. But at the same time, it's like if anyone does it, anything happens with someone that, dilutes or, just muddies up that image, you are going to find it hard to separate the performer from the art.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's not just him. It's happened with many different people, but also in many different areas. It's not just wrestling. TV, film, as Matt said, music as well. It's just it happens in everyday life, and it's just remembering at the end of the day, these people are human, and these things do happen.
I think it's one of these things where you get a lot of people who get very upset when you bring politics, when you bring stuff like that into gaming, into music, into things like that. It's just, why are we talking about this? This isn't anything to do with what we're into. And you get it a lot in sort of when Black Lives Matter came out, and when you had things like that, people didn't want to hear about it and stuff. It was just very much a case of this isn't to do with my hobby, this isn't to do with my thing and stuff. I don't want to hear about it and stuff. In my personal view, my personal opinion, and by all means, I'm not saying you're wrong for if anybody has a different opinion to me, but I think if you ignore the bad stuff, you're basically sort of, I'm not saying you're part of the problem. You're just sort of ignoring the reality of the situation and stuff.
You're just not a part of the solution. Yeah. I think is the better way to put it.
Yeah.
And so let me tell you, Jojo, just like how actually WWE addressed it, because you told the story, but it's worse than that. So he died on Sunday. No one knew what happened. And then on Monday, they did a tribute show to him, talking about how amazing he was. All of his matches, all of his careers, only for literally an hour after the show went off the air to find out that it was a murder-suicide. The next week, the chairman of the WWE, Vince McMahon, who in storyline was dead, by the way, so he went on screen. He died in storyline. His limousine blew up. That's just the world of professional wrestling.
So I remember.
Yeah. His limousine blew up, and his limousine blew up the week before the Chris Benoit stuff, and then he dropped that storyline, came on camera, addressed it, and he said, "We are never going to acknowledge this man's existence ever again." And to this date, they haven't. So here's the thing. I think that I'm a reasonable person. I'm willing to, if you are this artist, doesn't matter what it is that you do. If you have a tainted history of something that you've done, I don't rationalize your decisions. I weigh how bad it is, the things that you did. Are you mean to your coffee people? Are you mean to your assistants? Are you a giant dickhead who is, okay, I probably wouldn't like you in real life, but I'm not going to stop enjoying your work.
Yeah.
But then there's the line in the sand, right? Where you're so far like a Chris Benoit, or a pedophile, or anything that's just, I rationalize, like, that's too far. I'm done enjoying anything that you do. I make that decision that way.
Well, you see, you have I'm not sure you might have seen. There's a documentary on Netflix actually. It's about a guy called Jimmy Savile, who is he was basically a children's entertainer in the UK, and he did this thing called Jim Will Fix It. So basically, what he would do is, kids would write in and say, "Jim, will you fix it for me to meet, a wrestler or go on Concord or do stuff?" And he would sort it out, but. And he was pretty much, he was massive here for years on the BBC from the sort of 60s all the way up to sort of kind of the 2000s. And he died, and they had a tribute to him and everything. And then it started coming out that he was a notorious pedophile, and he was basically... now there is a doc. It might be on Netflix. I'm not sure if it'll be in Canada or not. But if it is there, you should give it a watch. But basically, there's always been stuff there. He was always a weird guy, but because people went, "Oh, he's just a bit quirky and stuff like," and he would say weird shit, and people would interview him, and he would sort of say things that were just slightly odd, and he'd walk around with sort of kind of like string vests on, and he was old and just grim looking and stuff, and he'd touch women, and he used to thing called Top of the Pops, and he used to sort of like always touch up girls and that and stuff. And one of his best mates with Gary Glitter, he was a fucking pedophile as well. And this whole thing was that people didn't face up to it, or they went, well, it doesn't matter what he does in the back door, as long as he's sort of, you know, he's being a nice guy, and he did a lot for charity, so he did a lot for hospitals, he did a lot for things, but so people just ignored all the weird stuff he was doing, and then it got to the point he either molested or indecently assaulted over like 500, 600 kids, boys and girls. And it's got to the point where it all came out. Loads of people came forward. The BBC had to do an apology and stuff. And it got to the point where they literally had to get rid of his gravestone and stuff like that, because people were just going, right, they wanted to literally rub him out of existence and stuff. And I think what really upset a lot of people over here was the fact that he went on and died of natural causes without any repercussions whatsoever, and nobody challenged him. It's horrible, absolutely horrible, and that's because people were very much the case of, yeah, well, what he does in the background and what the art is are completely two different things, and that's where you have an issue. When, like you said, if he was just a dickhead, he was just a bit weird, it'd be all right. But what people knew he was up to things. People would do jokes about it and stuff like that, and you'd see sort of old interviews about it, and nobody did anything about it.
A Bill Cosby situation, right? Like, is it really justice when you're sending like a 90-year-old like man that basically is incoherent to jail? Like, no, he won. He basically got away with all of the terrible things that he did. He basically did. Now, that being said, you know, we talked about Dark Side of the Ring and some of the bad things in professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is like 99.9% amazing. It's mostly good stuff. I just want to clarify if anybody is new to the world of professional wrestling. But what's interesting is, you know, like that moment in time, the Chris Benoit situation really changed the way of professional wrestling. Those guys that were in professional wrestling before that are your Mick Foleys, these guys that are just decrepit because they had to do so much more. It was the type of time period where if you were hurt, you took painkillers and you didn't tell anybody, because if you didn't work, you didn't get paid. Is essentially how WWE contracts were before the situation with Chris Benoit. After that, there were all sorts of safety protocols put in, health and wellness policies, so that people aren't abusing drugs that are not prescribed, etc. And now, guys in professional wrestling are they're physical actors that are not having to put their bodies as frequently in a place of harm as much as they did in the time of Mick Foley. Accidents still happen. There's a guy named Big E, who is a very lovable WWE superstar, who recently broke his neck on a basic move, on like the most basic of moves that he's probably done 100 million times. That's the nature of physical acting, right? It can happen at any moment.
I've just, because I've seen this advertised as well, because you're talking about, you know, different contracts now for these wrestlers. Is it because I've seen that apparently that Ric Flair, who is well into his 60s, he's doing a comeback fight soon. That to me,
it's ludicrous.
Just astounds me. That just, because I remember watching wrestling thinking, my God, he's like 15 to 20 years older than everyone else already in the ring. But now he's coming back at such an age. But Joe, I'd love to see him fight some 20-year-old wrestler just to really.
I'm gonna watch it because it's a freak show. It shouldn't be happening, but I'm gonna watch it. I need to see what this 70-plus-year-old man is planning on doing in the ring. I need to see it.
It's mad, man. It's just like, you know, I thought like Hulk Hogan was wrestling way past his sort of prime and stuff. It was just like, you know. Thinking of you sort of kind of think back in the day, Hulk Hogan's finishing maneuver was a leg drop, and it was just so like he just basically lifted his leg on somebody, and then he had all these new wrestlers and stuff were doing mass like power bombs and stuff like that. And it was just like it doesn't add up.
But that's the beauty of this being a scripted sport, where both actors in the ring are trying to keep each other safe. You know, one of the most athletically gifted and most popular WWE superstars is Brock Lesnar, and the man is like 46.
Yeah.
And he is in better shape than most 20-year-olds that I know. But any sport at 46, it doesn't exist. Like, you don't play at 46. It just, no, you're a manager, right? You're a coach. But if you play American football, you're lucky to make it past 27.
Ooh.
That's the beauty of
Brady.
professional wrestling.
Yeah.
These guys can go on forever. Ric Flair is apparently coming back.
Yeah, it's
I
mad.
still
like
yeah.
what's the view on sort of, because like I have watched some of these documentaries and it's stuff, you know, like Andre, the one about Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage and stuff, and they're all like obviously died early. And you know, stuff about Hulk Hogan and you know, this you know, Jake the Snake Roberts, who was basically just a drug addled sort of mess of a person. Is that just that was there literally a point where wrestling drove them to that, or
100%.
was that just them as characters?
It's both. It's both. I think it's the person and what they had to do night in and night out, right? So I mentioned that moment in time, right? Like the Chris Benoit before and after. Every guy you just listed is a before Chris Benoit type situation. I mentioned the positive of being a professional wrestler being that you can go into your 40s, into your 50s, and in some extreme cases your 60s and do this, but you have to do this 300 nights a year. They travel all over the place, right? Most of the shows that these guys do are not televised. Right now, like the WWE, they've got the 2 televised shows, Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown. And if you're not like a fan in the know, you might not be aware that they have 4 more shows in between that where they're traveling to smaller towns around where those big shows are, doing what's called house shows, where they're wrestling without it being televised. So they actually wrestle 300 plus days a year. So when you are in a situation where you're a Jake the Snake Roberts, you're a Macho Man, or any of those guys, and you get hurt, you tear a tendon in your arm, you have 2 choices. Your choice at the time was not wrestle for 6 months, not get paid, potentially get fired, and if you don't get fired, you might get what's a professional wrestling term, buried, where you get pushed so far down the card where you don't get TV time anymore. And that's the end of your wrestling career. That's option 1, which most guys did not opt for. Option 2 was pump yourself full of drugs, drink a ton of alcohol, numb the pain, deal with it, and put yourself through it over and over and over again every night, 300 plus nights a year. It was a cutthroat time in professional wrestling in the 90s and 80s. And we are seeing the damages now. Especially with social media being all over the place, right? Not sure how much you guys know about a wrestler who recently passed away named Scott Hall, aka Razor Ramon. The man was a mess. He was incoherent. He could barely talk. He eventually got his life together.
Wasn't he with didn't Diamond Dallas Page? He did sort of all that sort of stuff with him, didn't they?
Diamond Dallas Page saved his life. That man was in a wheelchair, incoherent, drunk all the time, on Percocets. Diamond Dallas Page convinced him to turn his life around by doing yoga, just getting active and moving, and turned his life around. But and that man was a shell of a human because of all of the drugs and all the addiction that comes obviously with doing drugs, from his decisions to have to move forward with the next show, even though you have a concussion, even though you have a torn ligament in your shoulder. You know what? I'm going to take 3 oxys and deal with it. The next time it's going to take 5 oxys, and then it keeps going and spiraling out of control. That was professional wrestling in the 90s, and now it's such a squeaky clean world because the WWE is really trying to emulate Disney in terms of being able to create really marketable people, right? And being able to treat this talent in a way that allows them to be able to perform 300 plus nights a year in a healthy manner while being able to be super marketable and super likable requires a lot of effort from the company, which we didn't have in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just to let's go back onto a bit of a positive. So a lot of wrestlers now, in particular, because a lot of wrestling is acting, they are putting on a show. The amount of wrestlers that are now becoming almost just as well known for taking TV and film roles as well as the rest is fantastic. Just for examples, obviously John Cena at the moment, being Peacemaker, bloody awesome. The Rock just in pretty much everything. Even Goldberg, in the TV show The Goldbergs, he's fantastic in that playing coach.
Is it The Longest Yard? Adam Sandler's remake of the Longest Yard.
Yeah,
and you get the amount of wrestlers in that film.
Oh yeah.
That movie is a wrestling a wrestling homage.
Yeah,
even though it has nothing to do with wrestling. That is arguably the most famous movie in the professional wrestling community.
Yeah, love that film.
That is a great movie. But yeah, Joe, it's just great to see all these guys, because I think in a way as well, them going on to do these acting roles, it's almost like a positive reflection, because you mostly see these guys from WWE, WCW, all these different areas. They go and do a big film, even like Dave Bautista. He's one of the biggest actors in the world now, and if you looked at him 10 years ago, people would have gone, nah, he wouldn't be a movie star. And look, he's done Guardians of the Galaxy, he's done Blade Runner sequel, he's done countless comedy movies. Countless comedy movies now as well. And more people now know him for acting than they would wrestling, which is
100% agree. 100% agreed. And it's almost considered a rite of passage where the most famous professional wrestler eventually becomes a movie star. Hulk Hogan was the first one. The Rock did it. John Cena's doing it. Roman Reigns is on his way to Hollywood. Batista. But what's cool now is that it's no longer reserved to the most famous people. There's other smaller characters within WWE that are getting roles in Hollywood, like Sasha Banks in The Mandalorian is a great example. There's a lot of crossover these days between professional wrestling and geek culture, which I think is awesome.
Did WWE get a cut of that? Is it in their contract that if they become movie stars because they made them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, so they would get a portion of Sasha Banks's contract. In fact, an interesting fact that maybe you didn't know is that the WWE gets a cut of everything John Cena does. Everything.
Ooh.
Everything. Now, and John Cena says he's actually super glad to give it. Like, I'm assuming it's probably not that big if he's fine with it. But the reason is because WWE owns the trademark to the name John Cena, and he is using the name John Cena across everything that he does.
Yeah.
The Rock
using The Rock.
Actually, The Rock negotiated to be able to use The Rock whenever he wants to.
All right, okay.
He doesn't anymore. He goes as Dwayne Johnson, but there was a moment in his career, in his Hollywood career, where he was always Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and he actually negotiated the rights to be able to use his name in everything that he did.
He seems. What do you think of him? Is he a genuine? Do you think he's a genuine sort of person, or more to do with the publicity?
I think that he's a genuine guy. I met The Rock when I was like 8. He's one of my heroes. And I mean, my interaction with him as a kid was really good. In professional wrestling, he's beloved in almost every regard. He also comes from a long family where his dad, his grandparents, his nephews, his nieces, his cousins, they're all in professional wrestling. So when it comes to professional wrestling, fans love The Rock. I'm not sure what the general sentiment of him is with fans that are not fans of him in professional wrestling, but I think the dude's a fairly genuine guy from what I can tell, but I don't know. I've never talked to him that deeply.
What's the film? It's basically about a wrestling family in Oh, what's it called?
Oh,
In
Oh,
London.
not
Fighting
without
with
my family.
Yeah.
Fighting with my family. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he got, what was it?
That
Because he was watching a documentary about this family when he was in London,
Paige.
and then
Yeah, Paige and her family.
yeah. That's
Yeah. That was good. That was really funny, that movie. And you know what? The one that plays her, Florence Pugh, obviously now that's another person who is just everywhere. And that film was basically her big break. So yeah. I'm surprised that Paige ain't in more movies as well, because I think she's done a bit of acting too. Or seen
Yeah.
something
Well,
anyway.
Paige is big on Twitch. She's a Twitch streamer, and she actually recently just left the WWE, even though she hadn't wrestled in almost a decade because of injuries, but she was still under contract with them. Like literally like yesterday. She's no longer part of WWE. Maybe that means that we'll see her in movie roles moving forward.
Mm.
Okay. We'll move on from wrestling. What is your thing? Actually, no. Actually, there was one question I was going to ask. You said, like, you know when you got to a certain age and you're just like, oh, I don't watch wrestling, that's childish and stuff. Obviously girls were probably involved and you're like, I don't watch wrestling, I'm a cool guy. What age was it when you decided, you just went fuck it? Do you remember the moment where you went, you know what, I don't give a shit, this is who I am, this
Yes,
is what
I literally remember the moment.
Yeah.
The moment was my first day of uni, when I met my flatmate, who was a bigger nerd than me, and I'm like, I can be myself. I like, this is it. And then from there, like literally it just it changed my perspective on anything. It's like, why do I like, why would I want to date you if you are all pissy about me liking Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Obviously we wouldn't jive. I'd probably rather date somebody that likes Game of Thrones. So like, I started to realize that like my hobbies and the things that I'm passionate about are something that, I'm not saying that whoever I'm with or my friends should be passionate about it, but like, they shouldn't ridicule me about it. They shouldn't ostracize me about it. And I realized that like, once I had that mentality, I started surrounding myself with people that I liked a hell of a lot more than I did throughout high school. And it was literally that moment where he snuck his face, we had this divider wall when we just moved in, and he sneaks his head and he's just like, do you want to play Mortal Kombat? I'm like, fuck yeah, I want to play Mortal Kombat. Yeah. And you know what? I think a lot of people go through that in college, where they finally find themselves and realize that, like, all that bullshit from high school and all of the dumb social mind games that you were forced to play between the ages of 14 and 18 are so stupid and irrelevant. And once you get out of that, you can really just be yourself and celebrate the things that you like, rather than hiding them, right?
Yeah, it's very, very liberating. Like our motto for the website is "Don't hide it, wear it." It's just very much sort of like, you are who you are, and it's like, but it's like, for me, I had two sort of things. So I was into sort of like heavy metal and rock music and stuff like that, and growing up in my school, we played rugby and you went to clubs and you didn't listen to rock music and stuff. You're very much, you listened to crappy dance music and things like that, and I was just like, so I did that for ages because girls and stuff, and then I hit about 16. I found a bunch of mates who were really into that sort of thing, and then it all clicked in, and I was like, oh my god, I can be myself, I can listen to the music I wanted to listen. But even within that subgroup, and I remember even into university, I've always been a nerd. My dad was. We always gamed. We played board games, painted miniatures and stuff. I was into Games Workshop stuff from day dot, and even then, I remember I started up a wargaming society with some couple of, and my friends ripped the shit out of me for it. And literally, I was in university. I was getting absolutely hounded to the point where I distanced myself from it all, because I felt like, I don't want to be sort of ostracized from my cool friends, even though we weren't the cool guys because we were into that sort of music and stuff. But I remember sort of getting to a point when I was slightly older, and I was sort of like hiding stuff from girlfriends and things, and then maybe hoping that they might not realize, I'd had some cabinets full of sort of geeky stuff, and I was in a band, I had tattoos, and I was doing all this sort of kind of inverted commas cool stuff, and then I was like, oh, but I'm a bit of a nerd as well, and I kind of like Star Wars, and I kind of like Lord of the Rings, and they'd be like, oh, as long as it's not too much. And then I wasn't finding anybody who was making me happy because they just weren't into the same sort of things. And I remember one day I was in the Games Workshop, and back in the day, they realized that people didn't want to sort of kind of be known to be buying stuff from them. So they would give you bags that were blank instead of the Games Workshop logo bag and stuff. And the guy turned around to me and went, do you just want a normal bag to carry that stuff in? Because I sort of get snuck in and, was looking around at me nervously. And I just, at that moment, I went, nah, man, just give me the logo bag. And I took the logo bag, I walked out, and I went, this is who I am. I don't give a fuck who cares about this and stuff. In the end, this is who I am. This is what I love. This is what makes me happy. And if people can't deal with that, then that's their problem. And I remember, and I started Geek Pride the next day. I started the website the next day, and I just went, that's it. This is who I am. And I felt a lot better about it ever since.
I'm so with you. There's somebody that I know, I'm not going to mention names, but he started a Call of Duty channel in 2009. And in 2009, he grew this Call of Duty channel to around 25,000 subscribers. For context, I would argue that 25,000 subscribers in 2009 is probably the equivalent of like 2 million nowadays. Yeah. It was really difficult to get subscribers back then. There was no money in it. Yeah. He got recruited to be part of a Call of Duty team called FaZe. I don't know if that rings the bell with anybody, but they're a huge esports organization, the biggest esports organization. And he quit a year into his affiliation with FaZe because someone at his high school found his YouTube channel and made fun of him for it. So he deleted all of his videos and stopped making YouTube.
Oh, man.
And he looks back on it being first of all, I could have been a millionaire. Being that early on in YouTube with FaZe, he would have been a millionaire. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. And he stopped because he was a 14-year-old kid that was made insecure because of his hobbies, which is so incredibly heartbreaking, right?
Yeah, I think I think now with the advent of social media, of programs like Big Bang Theory, and even in Stranger Things and stuff, they play in D&D and stuff. Like, even, I've got friends from back in Northern Ireland who are not nerds in any way, shape, or form, who are talking about playing Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that because they're seeing these things and it's more acceptable now. Obviously, a lot of geek culture is becoming a bit more, less of a pariah, less of a taboo, more of us like, all right, maybe it's okay. Gaming in general has come on leaps and bounds now and stuff. I don't think people bat an eyelid when you talk about gamers, to the point actually where I was at there's a thing called EGX in the UK, and it's like a massive gaming convention, and we were doing some interviews and stuff like that, and I started talking to this fella who was a big sort of, I can't remember his name, but he was like quite big on Call of Duty. And he refused to accept that he was a geek. He was like, I'm not, man. I'm just. I was like, dude, you are. And he's just like, well, I'm not. It's like, we're all the same, man. This sort of attitude isn't helping and stuff. And it's like, you're into something. You've got a massive channel. You're into these things, but you wouldn't accept it and stuff. It's just sort of, but because it's been normalized so much that they don't sort of, it's just like, well, gaming's just a normal thing. It's like watching football or playing fantasy football and stuff like that, and it's like, it's just a thing. So there's still ground to be made, I think, but it is becoming a bit more acceptable to be a nerd. But like, being a single man and sort of dating and being a nerd is hard. Because you get women who go, as soon as they're all cool because, oh, you got tattoos, you're cool, you do this, and then suddenly you kind of go, yeah, but I'm into Star Wars and Game of Thrones and I collect figures and like board games, and I've got all kinds of crazy stuff, and they just sort of zoop, just not interested, just gone.
Yeah,
Completely gone,
no, I feel you. I definitely get where you're coming from. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm so open with what I'm into. The only thing where I'm like, I have to kind of like dip my toes to see like, am I allowed to talk about this or is this going to be weird? Is Japanese anime. I love anime, but like that one's still kind of like. It hasn't reached the point of like being able to like Marvel or video games. Like you still kind of have to test the waters.
I've got my anime shirt on there. I've got my Attack on Titan t-shirt.
I've got my Piccolo statue
Oh, wow.
right next to me.
That's pretty cool. That's cool. No, Joe, what I do love anime. It's still one of them things that I think about 10 years ago I kind of went off the ball of. I didn't really watch a lot of anime shows for a while. And then I was flicking through Netflix and Death Note came on, and you know what? I never watched a show so quickly in my life, and I'd still probably say Death Note is my favorite anime series of all time because it was just as soon as you see the character like Yagami, you see this guy who you know basically the only thing about him is that he has a book that he can write someone's name in and it kills them, and that seems like such a straightforward process, but it's one of the most intricate stories I've ever witnessed.
Yeah,
and then you know, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, the way I tell people about Death Note is, listen, this is the story of a guy who could kill anyone on the planet with a book, who is in theory uncatchable, being chased by the world's greatest detective. That's it. That's my pitch for Death Note. And what's heartbreaking to me about Death Note is that in the early 2010s there was a bidding war over the live action rights of Death Note between HBO and Netflix. And Netflix ended up winning and made that terrible Death Note live action movie. And I'm just thinking and I'm like, man, after what I was just gonna say, well, after what HBO did with Game of Thrones and Peacemaker and the upcoming The Last of Us, what they could have done with Death Note could have been so good.
That actually,
I was gonna say,
sorry,
Willem Dafoe though in the film. Yeah, it's just gonna say Willem Dafoe though in Death Note, actually, when he's voicing Ryuk. That is fantastic.
The guy, yes, that's the best part of that movie. Yeah, the guy that voices Ryuk is by far the best thing in the movie. But what I would have loved,
Green Goblin.
Yeah, what I would have loved would have been, because Netflix decided to do a movie, HBO wanted to do a miniseries, a 5-episode miniseries on Death Note, and I think it would have been brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
It would have been.
So, obviously, you've talked about HBO and what they did with Game of Thrones, and obviously you're into Game of Thrones now. What are your views? I'm assuming you've read the books as well.
Yep. I've read not just every book. I've read those silly tomes that tell you the life stories of every king of Westeros. I basically read the Game of Thrones Silmarillion.
Does it not? Oh man, the Silmarillion. I've read that like 3 times and stuff, and it's still one of those books that you just gotta get through. But does it frustrate you that he hasn't finished the Winds of Winter yet? Are you just getting?
He's not going to. Yeah. He's not going to. My theory is that he actually has no idea how to end this.
Yeah.
And he just wants to die before he I really think that he wants to end on some crazy, he wants to be remembered as some like, oh man, like the work of art that was never finished. Like the Sistine Chapel, right? That was not properly finished. I think he thinks that way. I'm not saying that he is, because I really think that he doesn't know how to finish it. But he wants to go out making everyone think, oh, what could have been?
Yeah, well, that'll be the ultimate gotcha, wouldn't it? And that's what he likes doing. But it's sort of like, even if he gets the Winds of Winter out, it's just like what between Dance of Dragons and Winds of Winter. Dance of Dragons was 2012. 11, yeah, 2011. So you're looking at that's 11 years. If he gets this out in the next couple of years, there's no way he's going to be still alive for the Song of Summer.
There's still. And there's rumors that they're splitting A Song of Summer into a Dream of Spring and A Song of Summer.
Oh God!
There might be even 2 more after the Winds of Winter.
There's no way.
There's no way.
And the problem I have with this is, and I'm not sure what your views are. like I love the books. Like I've always been a massive Lord of the Rings fan. I was like, nothing's gonna beat Lord of the Rings. Like, there's no way. And then Game of Thrones came in. It was something that was completely new to me because you had a series of books where they killed characters that you loved. Like, I remember very vividly, and I've mentioned it on this podcast numerous times, finding out about the Red Wedding and stuff. And my sister and my dad had read that book before me, and they knew I was on that chapter, and they just watched me read this thing, and then my life just fall apart when that happened and stuff. And I remember when the last Dancer Dragons, when Jon Snow has his neck cut, and I literally picked up and went, fuck this book. I threw it down. I was just like, how dare he do this to me again after the Red Wedding? I was just like, what the fuck?
Matt, I'm not a big fan of reading, so I do audiobooks because I like to do things. Yeah. I was walking when I listened. I was walking to school when I listened to the Red Weddings. I had to stop at a park bench and just catch my breath because dude, I rewinded. I was like, what the fuck?
Did they just do
what the fuck? I literally rewinded. I'm like, did I misread that? Because that chapter is in a point of view of Catelyn Stark, and it ends with Catelyn Stark getting her throat slit, but like you just like, no, to this day I still like I haven't properly processed the Red Wedding.
True. And that's what's beautiful about it. That's what's so beautiful. It's like, it makes you feel uncomfortable, but it's like, it's changed me now, because I like now my books to have these sort of curveballs in it and stuff, and like, nobody's safe. And like, I'm actually gonna I've gotten into I've got an Audible account now, so I listen to loads of audio stuff now, audiobooks and things. There's another series, by the way, a guy called Joe Abercrombie. He does the First Law series. There's basically 9 books. There's a first trilogy, 3 independent ones, and the second trilogy, which I'm currently listening to. You should give them very Game of Thrones-esque in that it's sort of, you think it's about sort of kind of heroes and stuff like that, but loads of fucked up shit happens and stuff. So good, worth a listen. But anyway, they were so... when you're like reading it, and I remember sort of going back and forth on the page and just kind of going, like you said, just having to go, that just happened. They literally just killed a bunch of really, I love Robb Stark, and then his mother, and then I was just like, holy shit. And then they killed Grey Wind as well, and I was just like, no, not Grey Wind.
All hail the King in the North. Yeah. All hail the King in the North. Yeah. That quote where, like, for those that don't know, they decapitate Grey Wolf and Robb Stark, and they sew the wolf's head on Robb Stark's body and chant all hail the King in the North. That is grim.
Yeah,
that is grim.
Yeah, well, to be honest, when I thought Bran was dead, I wasn't too bothered. I was just like, oh well, because he kind of bores me and stuff. He well bored me in the series as well. I was just the books, Matt, there was nothing worse than when I flip the page and it says Bran. It's a Bran chapter. No, man. Yeah,
no, I'm with you.
Yeah, it was just so boring. I was just like, oh man, I just want this to be over and stuff. But like, when you go into the series and stuff, first 3 series are amazing. 4th, 5th, okay. When it gets on to like after that, it's just the last series.
They're guessing.
It was just like they made their money. What annoys me the most about the series is the fact that you had these really complex books with complex situations, geopolitical things going on, with lots and lots of threads being pulled and stuff like that, and they tried to condense it into 6 or 7. I can't remember how many. What was the last series? How many episodes?
Six episodes.
Into 6 episodes, and they just kind of went, right, so we're just going to finish all these things off, and it was just like, you can't. Why would you do that? You had so much more material to make that sort of like the ending. Bar Bran being democratically turned into king. I was like, fuck that. What?
It's the dumbest shit ever. Yeah, Let me put it into context for you. Because I've had this argument with people. All right, who should be king? Well, we should go with Bran because he has the best story. He has Tyrion.
Yeah.
You had to kill your father. You were smuggled to the other side of the world where you had to you had to be the hand of the king to a Targaryen. You've seen dragons. You've had a pretty interesting story, I'd say. Yeah. Anyone else has had a pretty interesting story. What a dumb way to elect somebody. I'm so upset with the show that all I'm clinging on is the books.
Yeah, that's
the
me
books.
Too, man. That's it.
The books still have my favorite character alive, which I, to this day, believe is the rightful king and heir of Westeros, my lord, Stannis Baratheon. I will die on that hill that Stannis Baratheon should come out as king as king of Westeros, but I digress. There's still so much meat left in the books that I'm hoping that George R.R. Martin looks at the show and at the very least understands what not to do. Yeah. Because he could do anything else and it'll be better.
Matt, do you remember, and this was up until the end of the seventh season, you kept saying about one certain character that you thought was going to be...
Yeah, and I was so upset. Right, so because I did sort of, it actually got a fair bit of traction. I did a lot of sort of kind of theory things like that. So I had a theory about how it was going to end, and it was basically Littlefinger was going to be, because in the books, Littlefinger is the puppet master. He literally, everything happens because he has made it happen effectively. As a character, he's amazing. It's just like, he is the epitome of what is, if you think historically and stuff like that, he's very Machiavellian. These are the sort of guys who made who did stuff. They're the ones who pulled the strings. And for him to get unceremoniously killed, just because we need to sort of cut this thread and stuff, I was like, fuck that, man. It's just like,
as if we're supposed to believe that he got outsmarted by the Starks, who've been getting bamboozled for the past decade by everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And see, my theory, and it completely died because he got killed. But basically, I had this sort of view that as a character, as the character, he would basically manipulate everything. You would have Jon and Dany, they'd sort of they get together. I was right about that. Then they'd sort of fight the is he Azor Ahai and stuff like that. Was he the chosen one? Blah blah blah. Maybe he'd have to sort of kill Dany because you have to sort of kind of plunge the sword into a heart of fire and blah blah blah, all this other stuff. But
all the stuff that didn't matter in the show,
which didn't matter in the show, they completely ignored it all and stuff. Little Griff's not in there. There's loads of stuff that they sort of kind of they've completely ignored. But he, I thought, they beat the White Walkers. Maybe what the end scene is going to be, or the last episode is going to basically be, you're going to have like Jon sacrificed himself, or maybe Dany sacrificed himself. So one of them is on the throne, and Littlefinger basically just turns around and kills him. And the last scene, and I thought this would be a perfect ending. The last scene, and I was talking to Finn Jones and Daniel Portman at a convention about this. I did an interview with them. I said, look, the last scene is basically Littlefinger on the Iron Throne. You're going to have the camera panning out, and he's going to be looking down, and then literally he's going to look up, and then it's just going to be scene, and the Game of Thrones music's going to hit in, and it's just going to be him on the Iron Throne. And I was like, that should have been the ending. The internet would have exploded, and literally it wouldn't have had that bad taste. People have been arguing about it. People have been sort of like, oh my god, that was an amazing ending. As it is, it petered out into this sort of dank squib of a horrible what the fuck happened. And it's put a bad taste in my mouth, and so it upsets me now that if he doesn't finish the books, then I'm going to be left with that legacy.
Let me tell you how I envision the series and the books ending. I actually envisioned it with Stannis Baratheon. So the concept of Stannis Baratheon is that he's the king that no one wants, but the king that everyone needs. That's the thread of Stannis Baratheon, because he's the one that's made the decision of, I'm not going to try and win the kingdom. I'm going to save the kingdom and earn it. That's why he goes to the north. fight the wildlings, etc. My theory was that he was going to be the one that was forced to try and get the houses together to try and fight the White Walkers, and no one listens, no one bands together. I really genuinely believe that the show was going to end with the White Walkers just winning and starting the Long Night all over again, because the Long Night was a thing that's happened multiple times in Game of Thrones lore. I thought this was the beginning of the Long Night, and it was literally going to end with everyone dying. That's it. And I'm not sure if that's a good ending, a bad ending. I'm just saying I could write something better than what they wrote. Better than what it's so dumb. Yeah. What we had was so terrible.
Danny, I think Danny turning fucking psycho wasn't bad. I think, but the thing is, it
had to be slower.
Yeah, you had to have a slower progression from basically, because you could tell there was little bits of her sort of kind of, you could see maybe there was a bit of an edge to her. And if they had even another series where they sort of developed that into it, then, you know, and that was my problem. It was so rushed at the end that they literally cut out certain things. The Battle of Westeros is, you know, as a military historian, is an absolute travesty of a thing. It's just like, you know, just firing off all the Thraki and, you know, cavalry charge into nothingness. Like, no military general would ever do something so stupid. But you know, the series, as much as it had some good parts, it was just it just left a really bad taste in my mouth, and it just made me think I just wanted the books more. But part of me sort of feels slightly like it's tainted, and it annoys me that he doesn't sort of, it's not done yet. And I understand that if you can't force yourself, you can't force somebody to write something and stuff, and you know, but it's like he's enfranchised so many people into this world of his, and it's like it feels like he doesn't care anymore. I've made the money now. I don't care. I know, and it upsets me, man, because it's like if he dies and he doesn't finish those books, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Now, Matt, you kind of hinted on something that is part of the reason why I probably will never rewatch Game of Thrones. I feel insulted by the Game of Thrones show, because I'm not saying that like it had to follow the books one for one, because the first 3 seasons they didn't either. Like there were some things that were different, and some things that they expanded on in the shows more than they did in the books. Like, but the reason why it's so problematic, it's insulting, because they made you care about a lot of things in the show that ended up being fucking meaningless.
Exactly.
Right? They got you invested. I'm okay to be invested in something and then get heartbroken. Red Wedding is a perfect example, right? But I'm not okay with getting invested in something and then it just getting tossed by the wayside. Littlefinger's a fantastic example. Is a great example of getting invested, being not forced, but like being getting something put in front of you in such a prominent role as was Littlefinger, and then basically at the end being told it didn't fucking matter. Everything that he did, every string that he pulled, everything that you thought he could do, you know what? It was meaningless and pointless, and you're an idiot for thinking otherwise.
It's laziness, and it's it was basically they were just like, we're it's costing too much money. You know, there was no forethought thinking about it. You know, they've literally kind of gone, oh, we can make money off this, and then they just kind of got their money and left, and they didn't really give a shit about. There's that meme of basically the drawing of the horse, and it's beautiful at the start, and then they literally stick figure legs at the end, and it's so apt because it's so true. They just did not give a flying fuck about
what ended up happening was, like, you know, they were making their Game of Thrones money, but then the 2 showrunners, DB Wise and something, then they just got tossed all that Star Wars money to make episode 7, and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna rush this and we're gonna go make Star Wars now because we're moving from one project to the next. And it's so unfortunate, because if you're willing to do that, it just meant that you really weren't all that into really creating something special for people. You were really there to create, you know, a show and make your money, which, like, whatever, like, that's your prerogative, like, make your money. But like, fuck, you made me care too much about this, and then you pull the rug underneath from me, and the only thing that I have now is the books, which I don't think are going to get finished.
That's it. It just doesn't, unless he sat on both books, or 3 books as you said it's potentially being split into, the second one's being split into another one. There's no way, bearing in mind how long it takes him to write a book, that he's finishing that series. There's no way. He's not the healthiest chap in the world, is he?
In theory, that's 30 more years of writing. In theory, potentially. Does he have 30? I mean, unless he's immortal, I really don't think so.
Yeah, and then it's just you know, I understand, I hate being forced to do things, and I can't write anything even for the website or for work or anything. I need to be in a place to sort of kind of do that, and so I understand if people are putting pressure on you that you can't do your best sort of writing, and I understand creative writing and stuff. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do. So, you know, but 10 years, man, 11 years, even if he did a little bit now and again, and he keeps on writing sort of little side things, you know, dunking in the egg and all these other little sort of things that are going on. He's like, come on, man, there's so many fans who adore your books, and they just want you to finish the series, to put to bed the ghost, the evil that was the series. They just want you to to basically do it properly, give us the ending we deserve, instead of whatever the fuck that was at the end, man. And the series is upsetting because it was so good, and then it just petered out.
Yeah,
and
I've been burned twice now by television series that I love. To this day, right now, I will say that I think the greatest TV show of all time is Breaking Bad. You might disagree or disagree. I think it's the greatest television show of all time. Before that, I was very much into a TV show called Dexter.
Oh, I love Dexter. First 3 series.
Dexter, you know, you can make the argument that the last 3 season series, they weren't the best, but they weren't bad. They weren't absolutely not bad. Dexter was genuinely killed by the last episode. Okay, by the last episode, killed all of Dexter for you. And I'm not exaggerating. Dexter grabs a boat, goes into a hurricane, and becomes a lumberjack. Did I make that up? I didn't. That's exactly what happens at the very end of Dexter. I might be saying it in a way that's very fast, but that's exactly what happens. That taught me to never call a show the greatest show of all time until credits roll on the last fucking episode.
Did you watch?
That's what it's taught me.
Did you watch the revival series?
Yep, and it did the same fucking thing. It was great. And then the last episode, I mean, to me, I'm not going to spoil it, maybe because it's a fairly recent show. The ending, I'm not a fan of it.
Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed that series. I was getting quite into it.
Yeah.
But then that last episode was just like, okay, so how can we put an end to this, but still spit in the face of everyone that's gone back to this afternoon?
I literally screamed at my television. I literally screamed at my TV. Again? You're doing this to me again? Because it's 10 years apart, and they fucking did it to me again. Since Dexter, I wholeheartedly will never call a show the greatest show of all time until the very last episode. And people are like, oh, do you think Game of Thrones is the best show of all time? It's getting there. And then it's not. No. But Dexter taught me, do not call a show the best show of all time until the final episode. That's why I think Breaking Bad's the greatest show of all time, because from the ending, it's cherry on top. You can make the arguments of it wasn't the best ending or whatever, but it didn't ruin the fucking show.
Yeah, there's it's ending series, especially good ones. It's hard. The one that hurts me as well is Battlestar Galactica. The last 2 seasons were absolute dog shit. The last season and the last episode especially was just what the fuck were you guys thinking? It was just that was just so upsetting, because the first 3 seasons were absolutely amazing, and then it just goes I don't know. They just kind of pulled it out of their arse, and it was a nightmare. But you know, it's hard. Have you watched The Expanse? Have you watched The Expanse at all?
No, I've read part of The Expanse.
Yeah.
I have not watched it. It's confusing to me because I don't know where to begin, because wasn't it originally a TV series, and then now it's an Amazon show? I thought it's all over the place. I wasn't sure.
It was originally an RPG, like a pen and paper RPG. Then they sort of made they wrote some books based on that, which are I've not read them, but apparently they're really good. And then they started making a series. Now, this is the reason I didn't start watching it, because it was on Sci-Fi, and I was like, oh, it's going to be like Space Sharknado or something like that. It's just going to be super naff. I am just not into that and stuff. And then, like, these guys, Pete and stuff, were saying, man, you need to watch Expanse. It's, like, the best sci-fi you're going to have watched in a long time. I was like, nah, man, no. And then it was just, it moved to Amazon, and they had 5 seasons. Now, it's just finished its 6th season and last season. And I was like, you know what? I'll give it a go. And honestly, man, it is the best sci-fi series that has been on TV in a very long time. It's amazing. It's so good. And the last season isn't perfect, but it sort of does it justice. It's not a bad ending, and they kind of, if you've read the books, apparently there's certain things which they don't sort of kind of bring into it, but it's not so egregious that it's upset sort of book readers and stuff like that. But it is, seriously, man, just the way it scientifically quite sort of plausible as well. So they do a lot of stuff which is sort of the physics behind it all, like, when the inertia. So basically when a ship moves, when it wants to stop, it turns around and reverses and puts its thrusters on, because obviously the inertia is always going to make you move forward, so it needs to slow it down. So they come into planets reversing all this sort of kind of space battles, which some of them are absolutely outstanding, superb space battles and stuff, with real guns and stuff like that. So good. So definitely, if you ever get a chance, man, it's on Amazon. Give it a watch. It is some of the best sci-fi you're going to see at the minute. It's so good, and the last season is good. It wasn't perfect because they had to condense it into 6 episodes, but it is really good, and it's got some really, really good characters as well. Characters you can kind of get behind, and they do it very well.
No, I'm definitely in. I'm waiting for The Boys to finish on Amazon. I don't know if you guys are watching that.
Mate.
I'm one of those people, I can't get into too many TV shows at the same time because I have so much going on. So I like to I'm watching The Boys. It comes out weekly. That's what I'm into right now.
What did you think of the last episode, man?
I haven't watched number 4. I haven't watched 4. I've watched the first 3.
Okay,
4. I'm watching it tonight.
1, Termite. All right. Anybody? By the way, if anybody's not watched this, by the way, spoilers. So stop listening or whatever.
Dude, I love the show because this is literally the meme of Ant-Man can defeat Thanos by going into his ass. Right? It literally was that.
Exactly that. I laughed my ass off, man. I was just, that is the coolest thing, and that's what I love about it. It's so. And Homelander, man, what an amazing bad guy! Like, it's just so
brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant
so
bad
good.
guy.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
just like
so The Boys
depth.
is absolutely fantastic. I turned it on like basically by accident. I was watching something on Amazon Prime, and then it did like the watch the next thing because my season ended and it started playing The Boys. I said, oh, okay, cool. So that's how I got into The Boys. But what a phenomenal show! Just and what's funny about there's no redeemable characters in The Boys. Even the good guys are just giant pieces of trash to the point where the one good guy, oh my goodness, what's his name? Every episode gets covered in guts. I can't remember his name. Huey. I wanted to say Billy. Huey. Even Huey, he's the moral compass of the show, is just always forced to go dark in order to get shit done. And that's what happens at the end of episode 1 when he realizes that all of this stuff that he's been doing to fight Vought the clean way has all been bullshit, that he's got to do it Butch's way.
Oh, Butcher. What an amazing character Butcher is as well. Just, it's the thing is, it's just real. It's like if there was superheroes, you'd think that's what they would. If you're
100%.
You're God, you're going to take advantage of that shit, aren't you? And you're going to do stuff like that.
If I had the ability to become Ant-Man and I liked cocaine, you don't think that I'm going to become little and go into an entire bag of cocaine? 100%. I would. That's exactly what these depraved superheroes would do. 100%.
And as soon as he went in, that man, and Jon Jo was saying before we came on that they apparently made the set. They made a full penis set inside a penis set for it, and I was just like, I knew what was going to happen. I was like, I could see this coming a mile away, but it still made me literally just lol whenever it happened.
Oh, it's so good. And his blood curdling scream as he's staring down at this mess. Oh, yeah, no, that show is absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Have you watched Kenobi at all?
No, I've been saving Kenobi.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the same in the UK, but it comes out episode by episode here. Okay, all right. So I'm for Kenobi because I'm watching The Boys right now. I'm waiting for it to all come out. I'm a Star Wars enjoyer. I'm not a Star Wars fan. In the sense where I've watched everything, but where I've watched all the movies. I've watched Clone Wars, but I'm not like diehard for Star Wars. I think that it has a ton of flaws and its fan base can be incredibly annoying, as I'm sure you probably know.
Yes.
We see like fan bases.
What I was going to say is my problem with Star Wars fans is that I don't think they realize it, but they are gatekeepers. They make it really difficult for people to get into Star Wars. And I'll give you like the example of Kenobi, where like there's all of this backlash about like how Kenobi met Leia. So I already know about that. And there's all of this backlash. Well, if that happened, then the hologram that she would have left in episode 4 would have said, Kenobi, we've met before when I was a little girl. It's just like, really? That's where you're drawing the line on canon? You think that this is ruining the canon of Star Wars because he met a girl, Princess Leia, who probably when she grew up doesn't remember who the hell Kenobi is? It's stupid. And I think those arguments make it really difficult for other fans to, when they're on the outside looking in, to want to make the investment into learning the full lore of Star Wars, which has such a rich lore, because they're so gatekeeperish on the internet with it.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that nerds in general have a lot of, is this sort of it can be bullies. And bearing in mind, people who were probably bullied quite a lot in their lives, resorting to similar tactics because somebody doesn't agree with you about something you love. And it's not something that sits right well with me. Like, I could be very passionate about stuff. I'm massively into Lord of the Rings, massively into Game of Thrones and Star Wars and stuff like that. I'm very passionate about we've had many arguments on this podcast about how Rogue One is one of the best Star Wars films ever. And, I can very much will fight with, to my dying day about that film. But if in the end, it is what it is. I even say that the prequel series are underrated. I've said it forever, and I've said it for years that it was underrated. There obviously were certain parts in it which weren't great, but I've never sort of been so down on it to the point where it's being bullying. And you got it affected. I can't remember the name. What's the actor called who played young Anakin?
Yes, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah,
well,
and like
Jake Floyd.
Yeah, and he, it ruined his, like, there's a whole thing about, don't do the same thing to the little girl who's playing Leia at the minute that you did to the little boy who played Anakin, because it ruined his life. And it's just like, and that stuff like that happens. They get so sort of wound up by their own sort of excuse me, I think you'll find that, and it's like, fuck off, man. It's just like, it's make believe. It's meant to be for kids. It's sort of for everybody's enjoyment, and you're killing that by being too gatekeeperish. It annoys me. I like having a debate about stuff, but I'll never gatekeep. I'm very, if people want to have views on things, that's very much up to them. But yeah, 100%. Star Wars fans are very. Yeah, I can see exactly.
Look, the way I see it is, so I do boxing.
Yeah.
And whenever a new kid comes in and wants to learn boxing, and we get in the ring to spar, do you think I'm beating the crap out of him? No. There's a saying that we have in combat sports: don't break your new toys, right? This is the new guy that's coming in who is going to be your sparring partner for years and years potentially. If you turn him away by beating the crap out of him early on, he's never going to come back. You've broken your new toy, and now you don't have another partner to spar with, right? And I think that is problematic of some geek culture as well, where I'll tell you, we can go back to wrestling, like new, especially like in the 2010s, younger kids being like, John Cena's the greatest of all time. And then some 50-year-old that is just such a traditionalist is just like, you fucking stupid 14-year-old, learn your history. Do you know Hulk Hogan? Do you even know Stone Cold? Read your wrestling history, you idiots. Like, yo, he's 14 and he just likes John Cena. Leave him alone. It's the same with the prequel series. I grew up with the prequel series, actually. I'm a 90s kid, so like that was the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
The episodes 1, 2, and 3. So that's how I got into Star Wars. Yeah, but it's part of the reason why I'm not a Star Wars like fan, because it's unlike Game of Thrones where you can get into like really serious discussions with people. And if it doesn't get heated beyond the which house should be royalty, who should come out as king. But Star Wars can get mean, like, you like the prequel series? Are you stupid? Like, Jar Jar, like, what?
I've never understood that. And my reasoning for that, and I remember, like, I was writing an article in the defense of George Lucas many years ago, because I think has some of the best lightsaber battles in sort of fights in any of the films. Darth Maul is one of the best bad guys.
Hell yeah.
It's just sort of, I grew up in the original trilogy, sort of in the 80s, but I love Star Wars as a whole, and I never understood, as much as I didn't really like the Gungans, and I wasn't a massive fan of some of the acting and stuff. If you think about it, Ewoks are fucking ridiculous. Like, what the hell? You've got a bunch of furry bears, teddy bears, that have destroyed an elite sort of, Imperial unit on a planet. It's just like, that's bollocks and stuff, but you love it. And it's the same with the Gungans and stuff. It's a similar sort of thing. It's just down because we were brought up in the 80s, so it's okay to have teddy bears running around and sort of, poking things with sticks. But when you've got animated sort of kind of, lizard men and stuff like that, then that's ridiculous. Why would you have that and stuff? And you can now see that because people of your generation are now older and they can express their views on it, that the prequels are getting more of a hearing and stuff. Like, people are starting to appreciate it more because the younger generation at that time who were brought up on the prequel series can voice their views on it, and they say, you know what, it wasn't that bad. It's just because you assholes who were into the original trilogy were gatekeeping, and it's not that bad.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't think as well. When you look at the prequel trilogy, especially you look at episode 1 now, that was in 1999. The special effects in 80-90% of that movie hold up still fantastically well. Even if you look at stuff like Jar Jar Binks, that was a motion capture character in 1999. We got films that are even coming out now that, you do a mocap character, they still look rough as hell, but that was almost seamless, Not just that, CGI backgrounds for the majority of the films, and look at all the tweaks that have happened in between. Even Yoda, look, you had Yoda in episode 2 and 3, just this animated character, and on screen he just looked brilliant. His fight with Dooku in episode 2, I still love that. I think they
overdid the CGI. I appreciate a lot of it was groundbreaking. A lot of it was stuff that they were using because it was new in and stuff. But I think one of my issues with the series is more the fact that, and they kind of did this with the sequels, is like all the tangible physical props and things and stuff they didn't use as much as that, and so it was a big change. You've got the suddenly loads of CGI. It was one thing that annoyed me about The Hobbit, when you had Lord of the Rings films with these amazing sort of like miniatures or bigatures as they were and stuff, and it was like physical, it was tangible, and then suddenly you had The Hobbit, which was just like CGI all over the place, and I was just like, I'm not really happy with that.
What? I can't even bear to rewatch the Hobbit trilogy. I watched it all the way through because I was intrigued, because I thought maybe, stretching one book into 3 might not be too bad if they actually make it engaging. But it wasn't. It was just fucking boring. Even the last film, The Battle of the Five Armies, it was like you got 1 hour of like, this massive spectacular, and it's like, all right, we're just going to drag out the last hour and a half now to do
they did
nothing.
It shouldn't have been 3 films. It should have been either a long single film or 2 at most and stuff. But
could have worked with 2.
Yeah, they could have worked.
It could have worked
they
on
stretched
2.
it out. Some of the exposition I actually didn't mind, but it was just sort of it was a kid's book. There's not a lot of depth. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's definitely not the Silmarillion. I'm kind of hoping the new series kind of ties in with a lot of the darker themes the Silmarillion have and stuff. There's some really dark stuff in there. But
now what do you think about the backlash of like the dwarf queen not having a beard and there being a black elf and people getting upset? Dude, so it's like really in this universe, your line in the sand is a fucking dwarf not having that is what triggers you. Or there being a black elf. Are you an elf? Are you an expert of elves? Do you live with elves? No, they're fucking fictional figure. There could totally be a black elf.
Yeah, man. And it really annoys me when people start throwing race and stuff in the sort of into fantasy, especially and stuff. It's like, it's fantasy. It's whatever you know. It's just it annoys me. And I've seen a lot. There's a guy on TikTok who does Lord of the Rings facts. What's he called? But yeah, he had a load of guys sort of kind of like kicking off with him and stuff because of that. You know, it's like, oh, you've got a black dwarf and stuff. It's like, fuck off, man. It's just like, yeah,
who cares?
Yeah, who cares? It's you know, it doesn't matter, and it's stuff like that really that sort of gatekeeping that really, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Toxic gatekeeping and stuff, and it's just like,
Joe, I still think one of my favourite things, and this was going on for years. People used to moan about Jurassic Park about the accuracy of the dinosaurs, and you know, I know people, especially when going through college in particular. There was a bit of a resurgence when they were coming out on DVD and Blu-ray, and people were rediscovering them. And I remember one of my tutors at college actually really had a big moan at Jurassic Park, saying, "Well, this dinosaur definitely shouldn't like this. Most dinosaurs had feathers and all this shit." And I remember when Jurassic World came out, the one line that B.D. Wong's character had is, well, we can make the dinosaurs look and be however we want them to be.
I like that.
Isn't that more exciting?
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant. That's a great example of saying, well, hang on, we're going to address a 22-year-old moan from some of these fanboys and just go, well, we made them exciting. Isn't that better than having some boring shit dinosaur that you're going to moan about anyway?
Right. I feel like we could carry on talking forever here, but I'm very mindful that we're going to take up more of your time, Santi. So maybe we'll move on to our last section, and then we can let you go about your life. So it's a section you know very well, and it's not a section that we stole from you in any way, shape, or form.
No, not at all.
No. But okay, so for we've been doing this quite regularly now. We quite enjoy it. We unfortunately don't get as much attention for ours as you do for yours. There are obviously more people into the wrestling or something, but we basically pick a franchise. It can be whatever franchise you want. It can be, you just name the franchise, and then we
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, okay, Game of Thrones.
Let's put it to the test.
I was going to do Game of Thrones for you. I'm going to do a wrestling one for you.
Sure.
Because, just because I feel like I have to. And then we'll each do another one of our choice and stuff. So we've got some TikTok material.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm going to do this first one. Now, bear in mind, my wrestling knowledge is minimal, but I'm not sure if you've had this guy on your thing or not. So
okay,
all right. Okay.
You better have their Wikipedia up.
I do. I've got the Wikipedia up just the off chance. Right. Okay. So, all right, Santi. I'm going to do this. I've been waiting to do this for ages. All right, Santi. Name the wrestler. 60 seconds. Go.
Are they active right now in wrestling?
No.
Okay. Are they alive?
No.
Okay. Male?
Yes.
Okay. Were they active in the 90s in wrestling?
Yes.
In the 2000s in wrestling?
Very, up to 2001-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A former world champion in the WWF, WWE.
No.
Never held a world title.
No.
Okay. Did they ever go to WCW?
Yes.
Okay. Did they pass away in 2001-ish?
He died in 2007.
2007. Are they in the WWE Hall of Fame?
Not that I know of.
Okay. A former Intercontinental Champion.
No. Okay, so one more question, and then I guess. So yeah.
Let me think here. Were they ever part of a professional wrestling stable?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. You have stumped me, sir. Okay, so if they passed away, that's the biggest hint that I have. I'm trying to think. 2007.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
He was he had a feud with he's on and off. He had a feud with my favorite wrestler of all time.
Okay. Is this Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog? No, because he was an Intercontinental Champion.
Yeah. Bam Bam Bigelow.
Bam Bam Bigelow, good one.
Yeah.
We have not done Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah, I was like, they haven't done Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah, we have not done Bam Bam yet.
When he came to Belfast, Bret the Hitman Hart fought Bam Bam Bigelow, and I was just like, they've not done Bam Bam Bigelow, so
we have not done Bam Bam. No.
So there you go.
Good one. No, that's a good one.
There you go, John.
Okay. There was no way I was even going to try and challenge on that one.
Okay, so I've got a Game of Thrones one for you then.
Okay, all right. I have no idea what kind of questions to ask here, so I'm gonna let's see.
Okay, so Game of Thrones, 60 seconds. Go.
Are they Westerosi?
Yes.
Okay. Are they male?
Yes.
Are they from a noble house?
Yes.
Are they from a house in the north?
Yes.
A Stark?
Yes.
Do they die during the series?
You don't see them die.
Ooh.
Are they a Stark? You said
they
that.
Are, well,
okay.
Let's just say,
is this Rickard Stark?
Sorry, say it again.
Is this Rickard Stark?
It is not Rickard Stark.
Okay.
No.
It's a male, a Stark.
He's not. He might not be a Stark anymore. There's a clue for you. Okay, one more guess.
Oh,
and then one more question, and then you can have a guess. I'll give you another.
You can ask
it. Give you a hint. That might be too. Okay, he was. Oh no, this might be too much of a hint for you. Let's just say he used to be a member of the Night's Watch.
Oh,
Benjen Stark.
It isn't Benjen Stark.
What?
That's what I was going to say.
Cold Hands.
In the show, we don't know in the book yet. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
There you go. Okay.
Darn, I see why you struggled with Westerosi.
Yeah, it's just like, is it? Yeah, technically, yeah. Okay. Jon Jo, what's yours?
I'm going to go with a character from The Boys.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Since we've all watched it, we can do this one.
Okay, so The Boys, 60 seconds. Go.
Are they male?
They are male.
Are they a soup?
Yes.
Are they...
God, I'm trying to think. Right.
Are they part of the Seven?
Yes.
Former part of the Seven?
Yes.
Is this translucent?
Oh,
Let's go!
What a guess!
Woo!
31 seconds. What a guess!
I was trying not to say
Get
it first.
him.
I was trying not to say former member, but then you went straight into it. I was like, yeah, I've got to say it's a former member.
That was
Your hesitation, I had to say, I was like, this is... There's an asterisk to are they a member of the Seven, so I had to figure out what that was.
Oh, man. Okay.
Oh,
All right, Santi, give us one of yours.
Okay. Trying to think of something we've all watched that we all have good expertise in. You know what? I think if we do it for TikTok, because it's just out right now, it'll help you guys with the views. Let's go The Boys again.
Okay, cool.
Let's go The Boys.
Okay, so The Boys, 60 seconds. Go. Okay.
male or female?
Depends.
I know who it is. I just can't remember the name. Okay. Oh no. Does he shapeshift?
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's not the person I'm thinking of.
Are they a member of the Seven?
Yes.
Oh.
What's his name? The black
Black Noir?
Black Noir.
No.
Ah.
Oh God.
That's very different origins, that one.
I'm
shit.
wait a minute.
Are they dead in the series?
Yes.
Ah.
Here's a hint. They are dead in both the books, in both the comics and the show.
Fuck.
Ah.
Okay, one more guess. One more question and then a guess. Okay,
Sure.
So we've got male-ish or male or female, depends. Formerly in the Seven, dead in the books and the series. God.
Oh, no, I was just about to say Lamplighter, but that's not really
Not Lamplighter.
No, because I was going to say that's not really a tricky male or female one.
Fuck, I don't know.
All right, I think I stumped you guys.
Yeah.
All right, so the reason it was either or was because in the comics it was a male, in the show it was a female. It's Stormfront.
Very good. All right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. All right.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The only thing I was thinking was because of Black Noir in the comics, because obviously the TV show's kind of established a different origin for him, but in the comics he is a Homelander clone.
Yep.
Oh, that's true. Isn't he? Yeah, he is.
Very, very weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That was good.
Like, I honestly feel like we could talk to you for ages, man. It's been amazing, but we're verging on 2 hours now after saying it was only going to be an hour and a half, and stuff. Some very vigorous nerdery going on, but really appreciate your time. Do you want to say about your podcast, about your streaming and stuff? Just let people know about that.
Absolutely. I'll plug our podcast. So you can find us on any podcast services around the globe. Our podcast name is Straightshoot, a wrestling podcast. We're available on YouTube if you want to watch a video version of the podcast. We're on TikTok, Straightshoot. My own personal page on Twitch is called Santi's App. I stream there 6 nights a week if you want to come over at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we can talk about whatever you want. When it comes to geek culture and what I can talk about, I would say with the exception of Game of Thrones, I am a jack of all trades, master of none. So I can talk about everything, but not everything so deeply.
Yeah. But man, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed tonight. Thanks a lot for taking some time for us. I really appreciate it. For tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Jon Jo Cosgrove.
Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.
And Santi.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for having me.